I've been promising for some time to start talking about regenerative agriculture. It's kind of the cutting edge of the sustainable development and sustainability world. And by cutting edge, I mean it's practically been ostracized from those groups because regenerative agriculture in all its forms, not just cattle ranching, but in terms of plant agriculture and everything adjacent to agriculture, has been sort of pushed to the side because it is a classic form of doing these things. This is a return to our sort of foundational ways of doing agriculture. It's a rejection of modern industrial agriculture. And a lot of people reject that partially because it can't be managed, it can't be controlled, it's not centralized. In fact, it is decentralized. And to understand the hostility to it, to understand what regenerative agriculture is, you need to understand what sustainable development is. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I have a PhD. Whoop-de-doo. It's not that big a deal. PhD, most of the dumbest people I've met in my life have had PhDs. But I do have a PhD, and my PhD is in public policy. My public policy PhD I got from Portland State University, which is not exactly a high-ranking university to most people, but that university is cutting edge in one thing really only, and that is everything to do with sustainable development. Back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, that university retooled itself to be the cutting edge of sustainable development, and they succeeded. They attracted to their public policy program and to some of their environmental science programs and others most of the top minds in sustainable development. In my PhD program in public policy, which was focused on sustainable development and green philosophy, I found myself in classrooms. My peers were Harvard graduates, Princeton graduates, like students who had undergraduate degrees from prestigious business and education schools and things, and who were then working on sustainable development public policy, which was weird. Didn't quite understand it at the time, but once I really began working on my doctoral dissertation on sustainable development, I began to understand where they were coming from. They were wanting to take whatever their passion was, whatever they had gotten their undergraduate and graduate degrees in, and apply it to sustainable development. These are true believers in environmental causes. I will say right up front, I don't share most of their passion for environmental issues. I don't because I learned how to read peer-reviewed articles and became, we'll say, suspicious about the official narrative. That having been said, I am not hostile to environmental issues in the slightest. I am hostile to the misapplication of them for other gain, for the gain of big business and government and other things. The thing that attracted me to sustainable development as a subject was this professed value of decentralization, getting things away from centralized power and authorities and coordination from distant places, back into the hands of local people to make their own decisions. I saw this firsthand before I got into that program with a lot of people who were doing on the ground work of what they called sustainable development. They were trying to get local poor communities in cities to learn how to garden in available spaces, how to reclaim some urban land. They were trying to help, farmers out, get their land thriving again. And they share the same intellectual space and policy space as people who are telling us that someday soon we will all eat insects and we won't eat animals anymore and that we'll be happy and we'll own nothing. And where does this all come from? I mean, this stuff was born from the 1960s and before environmental movements. In fact, in my dissertation, I go into how this stuff goes back to the 19th century. And it goes to a lot of the sort of more radical philosophies coming out of the United States and out of Germany in those times. But in our time, we see sustainable development is built on something here. And it's such a huge topic, I can't do this in a short form video. So I'm going to do several on these in the coming months, probably. And the foundation of sustainable development, is the very basic concept that we should take no actions today that undermine future generations from meeting their own basic needs. That's practically a functional definition of sustainable development. Sustainable development can be defined as development that we do today that does not undermine the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And underlying that is something called the 7 generations principle. This is where the arrogance comes in the modern sustainable development world. It is the idea that we can undertake no development today that undermines the ability of people 7 generations from now to meet their development goals. You want to know what 7 generations is? 7 generations ago, this is January 2023 when I'm recording this, 7 generations ago was the year 1848. Think about that for a second. A generation is generally considered 25 years. So 7 generations is 175 years. That means that people in 1848 should not have been building infrastructure to meet their needs that undermines our ability now in 2023 to do the same. If that sounds ludicrous to you, it should, because aside from knowing basic things like needing clean air and clean water and the ability to grow food, we don't really know what the basic needs of people will be in the year 2198, because that's 175 years from now. You begin to see the problem. In fact, most of the underlying principles of sustainable development are so vague, they're so empty and so devoid of meaning that you can impose upon them anything you wish. And I do mean anything. This is why you begin to see sustainability talked about by big businesses who, in the US and Europe, where most of their markets are, talk a good game about this stuff while then going and using, well, let's just be blunt about it, using labor from countries that don't believe in basic human rights and things, which is also a violation of sustainable development goals in general. In sustainability, there are several legs to it. One of them is social sustainability. And this is where you get your social justice talk from. This is where you get all that stuff. And these companies, who are usually the biggest pushers of this outside of governments, and they're working hand in glove with governments, by the way, to achieve these things, will tell you that you shouldn't eat meat because it's bad for the environment, while then trying to sell you things made of pea protein, which were made in horrifyingly bad conditions overseas, typically in China, by employees who were maybe not exactly the freest human beings in terms of even by their own country standards. That's what we're dealing with here. This is mostly about sustainable development is about two things: power and money. And this is why regenerative agriculture is pushed to the side, because you cannot decentralize an economic system and maintain power for those at the top of the economic system. That's just not how it works. What you get out of the equation here with sustainable development is more regulation, more central control. And they do it in the name of phantom problems in the environment. And we saw a bunch of these come and go over history. And so what do they tell us now? Well, that if we are going to make sure that 7 generations from now people can meet their needs, well, cattle being one of the biggest drivers of carbon, which is nonsense, it's actually not true, needs to go, that we need to eat less meat and less meat and less meat. And I've gone over in the past here on this channel I've made videos of showing you that actually insect agriculture, if we were to replace beef with insects, it would be catastrophic for the environment, that the carbon output of that would be orders of magnitude higher than with cattle. And the people pushing this know this, because this isn't about the environment. This is about control. So what is our aim here? What is the aim of all of us in the carnivore space who actually care at all about the environment to some degree, like I do, or like many of you do? What should our goal be? We need to come up with a counter narrative. We need to show that animal agriculture is actually not only part of a proper human diet, which we can peg to that social sustainability goal. Remember, one of the pegs of sustainable development and sustainability is social sustainability. And this is all about empowering people to make their own choices so they can thrive, all that stuff. And we know from experience, real lived experience, which a lot of these people really profess to care about lived experiences. We know from our own lived experiences that we think more clearly, we experience much better health, more robust health by eating a carnivore or very low carbohydrate ketogenic diet that is heavy in the meat of ruminant animals. We know this. And so that's one of the things we must do moving forward. But beyond that, pegging this to the 7 generation principle, regenerative agriculture, before I will make a proper video on regenerative agriculture in terms of cattle, what it is, but we know that we can regenerate the land, hence the name regenerative. We can bring back over-farmed land that is where the topsoil has eroded away because of chemical-heavy plant-based agriculture, by letting animals graze on them for a number of years. We know this. We know there's enough land available if we retool our plant-based agriculture. We know there's enough land available to make it so that anybody who wants to have an animal-based, very low carbohydrate diet can do so without harming the ability of those who don't want that to live how they want. We know we can do it. We know we have the land without having to cut down rainforests. It is possible, but some changes have to be made. So, for example, all the focus on animal agriculture being bad is really funny in a world where, at the same time, we hear about how much water is used to grow things like almonds out in California. I mean, if you saw the amount of water they use, it would, if you understood how much water they use for that, and how there are people right here in North America who can't get the water they need necessarily without paying an exorbitant fee, it would infuriate you, because it violates the very principles of the same people pushing plant-based agriculture. It does, but they don't care because it's not animal-based, and because this is not really about the environment for most of these people. Yes, there are people who are passionate about the environment, who believe these things, but they're not the decision makers. The decision makers don't care. What they care about is their money, and they care about their power. That is what they care about. So remember the 7 generations principle, folks. Decisions made today cannot undermine the ability of people 7 generations from now to make their decisions. And if you think you know the first thing about what people 7 generations from now need to thrive, you have no idea. What will the world be like on the cusp of the 23rd century? We don't know. So I'm curious what you want me to cover as I go over sustainable development in the future. Because at the end of the day, this is a huge topic, and you really start getting into power dynamics. You start getting into ideology, because ideology is really what's at the bottom of this topic, is just pure ideology, built on a basic concept that we should all be able to agree on. The things that we do today shouldn't make it harder for people in the future to live. That should be something we can agree on, that you want your great-grandchildren to have the ability to thrive. That should be a given. So let me know what you want to see in the future on this, because this is a huge topic, and this, I could go into, United Nations policy and the various programs they've got, including the one that's supposed to go into effect by the end of this decade. This is the one that causes all people to, raise their eyebrows at stuff being said. It's where all the bug-eating rhetoric comes from. But let me know what you want to see in the future, where these ideas came from, and what they mean for us, because we do need to come up with a counter-narrative about this. And one of the counter-narratives is that, in fact, an animal-based agriculture and animal-based diets for human beings is not only sustainable, it's actually properly what the biosphere should look like on the planet. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't, it does help. As does sharing this on social media, that helps too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.